shootings we just mentioned led to the death of Dollar General manager Alexis Hill, which the community is still grieving over.
Topping our news, the manager of a Columbus Dollar General store is dead tonight after police say a customer shot her after a small purchase, then later opened fire on police at a separate scene.
It's really heartbreaking. I'm totally destroyed by it.
Store manager Alexis Hill was shot and killed late this morning. Loved ones, as you can hear.
She had 4 cents in her hand, not a threat, not a weapon. 4 copper cents she was counting back to the man across the counter when he raised a pistol to her face and fired. By the time the doors swung shut behind him, Alexis Hill was gone, and a quiet Tuesday morning in Columbus, Georgia had become something this city is still trying to understand. Because the man who killed her didn't want her money, he didn't know her name, and in a matter of hours, he'd turn his gun on the officers hunting him, leaving a trail of wounded behind him before it was over. What could make a stranger do this over pocket change? Before we go further, a warning. The details of this case are disturbing, and some of what we cover may be difficult to hear. This is criminal affairs. And if you're the kind of person who needs to understand why, subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Her name was Alexis Hill. She was 44 years old, and for years she managed a Dollar General store sitting at the intersection of Victory and Marathon Drives in Columbus, Georgia. A corner of the city that sees more foot traffic in a single morning than most people realize. To understand this case, you have to understand the woman at its center, because long before she became a name in a police report, she was someone the people around her already knew. Corporal Heather Hicks of the Columbus Police Department was one of those people. Hicks didn't meet Alexis through this case. She met her years earlier, responding to a domestic violence call involving one of Alexis's own employees. The kind of call that puts a manager and a police officer in the same room under difficult circumstances. That's where their paths first crossed, and it's where Hicks formed the impression that stayed with her. Kind, generous, and dependable. That's how Hicks described her. Those aren't the words people reach for when they're trying to make someone sound impressive after the fact. They're the words people use when they're describing someone they actually knew. Someone who showed up, handled things, and treated people decently, long before there was any reason for a police officer to remember her name years later. By all accounts, that reputation extended to how Alexis ran her store. She wasn't a manager who stayed behind a closed office door. She worked the floor. She helped clear lines during the rush. She was the kind of presence employees and regular customers alike could count on being there. At the same time, Alexis was working towards something beyond that store. Family members say she had been planning a move to Colorado to be closer to her sons. It's a detail that says something quieter than the image of a mother raising children under one roof. It suggests distance, and the kind of plans someone makes when they're trying to close that distance. She was working toward a future that put her nearer to the people she loved most. That was where things stood by the summer of 2026. A woman known for being dependable, a manager who worked alongside her staff instead of above them, a mother with a plan already in motion to be closer to her boys. On the morning of June 23rd, Alexis clocked into her shift at the Dollar General like she had so many mornings before her. No reason to expect that day would be any different from the ones that came before it. It was 10:46 in the morning when everything changed. That's the time Muscogee County Coroner Buddy Bryan would later confirm as the moment Alexis Hill was pronounced dead. A detail that places this crime not in some abstract sense of that Tuesday, but in a single specific minute of an otherwise ordinary morning. Before that minute, there was nothing unusual happening at the register. A customer approached the counter. His name was Jerome Willis, 33 years old. He was there for one thing: a package of hamburger buns, ringing up at a total of $1.58. He handed Alexis $2 bills, crumpled from his pocket. She did what she'd done thousands of times before. She began straightening the bills out in her hands, preparing to count back his change. That's when Willis drew a handgun and shot her. There was no argument leading up to it. No raised voices. No indication, according to everyone who has since reviewed what happened, that anything was building toward this moment. 1 second, a routine transaction was unfolding the way it does in stores like this one every single day. The next, Alexis Hill was on the ground behind her own register. Columbus Police Chief Stoney Matthews would later speak about this moment directly, and he didn't soften it. The incident was captured on surveillance video, and after reviewing it, Matthews called it exactly what it was. "We got it on video," Matthews said, "and it's just a cold-blooded murder."
The people. And to be quite honest, Chuck, I think that we need to do more. We're going to have to go back and put together a strategic plan to make sure our patrol's walking in and checking on some of these clerks, because after watching that heinous video, it just makes me think we can do more.
What happened next inside that store is, in some ways, almost harder to process than the shooting itself. Willis didn't run. He didn't panic. He didn't say a word to anyone in the store. He simply turned, walked back through the doors he'd entered minutes earlier, and left. His pace unhurried, as if he were finishing an errand rather than fleeing a homicide. He left without his change. He left without a word. And he left behind a woman who, investigators would soon confirm, he had never met before that morning. That fact would come to define this case more than almost anything else. Alexis Hill and Jerome Willis were strangers. No history, no dispute, no connection of any kind, beyond the few seconds it took for one of them to buy hamburger buns from the other. By 11:40 that morning, according to a preliminary report later released by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Columbus police officers were actively searching for Jerome Willis. Less than an hour had passed since Alexis Hill was pronounced dead, and the city's police department was now working to locate the man responsible before he could hurt anyone else. They wouldn't have to search much longer. Roughly 2.5 hours after the shooting on Victory Drive, officers located Willis about 1.5 miles away in the parking lot of what used to be Muskogee Elementary School, off Baker Plaza Drive. The school no longer operates as a school in the traditional sense. The building now houses a robotics program and a family resource center. But at the time officers converged on that parking lot, there were students and staff inside. That detail matters, not because of what happened to them. They were not harmed, and the building itself was not the target of anything Willis did, but because of what it says about how close this entire situation came to unfolding somewhere far more crowded, far more vulnerable than a parking lot. Officers approached the location. Willis did not surrender. Instead, he opened fire. In the exchange that followed, a Columbus police officer was struck. It's worth being precise here, because early reporting on cases like this often gets details wrong. The officer who was shot was not the K-9 handler assigned to the department's K-9 unit. That handler, Corporal Brent Wilson, was not injured in the exchange. But Wilson's partner was. Havoc, the department's K-9 officer, was shot during the confrontation. Havoc is a 2-year-old German Shepherd, cross-trained in narcotics detection, tracking, and apprehension. A working dog, present that day as part of the effort to bring Willis in. Officers returned fire. Willis was struck and went down in the parking lot. He was pronounced dead at the scene. In less than 3 hours, the entire sequence had run its course. A murder inside a Dollar General, a manhunt across the city, and a shootout outside a former elementary school that ended with the man responsible dead and 2 more members of the Columbus community wounded by his hand. The aftermath moved quickly. The wounded officer was transported to a hospital, treated, and released. The Columbus Police Department would later describe his condition simply, that he was taking things day by day, recovering from an injury that could have been far worse. Havoc's situation was more serious. He was airlifted to Auburn Veterinary Hospital, arriving in critical enough condition that his survival wasn't guaranteed. For hours, a department that had already lost 1 member of its community that day now waited to find out whether it would lose another. This one with 4 legs and a badge of his own. What's left, once the sirens go quiet and the parking lot is cleared, is a chain of consequences that started with a package of hamburger buns and ended with a homicide, a manhunt, and a shootout outside a school. 2 institutions, a retail store and a police department, were left counting their wounded by the time the sun went down on June 23rd. If a case like this deserves more attention than it's gotten, the best way to help more people find it is simple. Hit like before we go any further, because what comes next is where this story gets even harder to explain. Jerome Marquis Willis was 33 years old at the time of his death, and to the people who crossed paths with him in passing, he wasn't a name anyone would have flagged as dangerous. He didn't have a public profile. He wasn't known in the community the way Alexis Hill was. What he had instead was a paper trail, one that stretched back over a decade before that Tuesday morning on Victory Drive. Court and arrest records show that between 2010 and 2024, Willis was arrested 6 separate times. These weren't cases involving violence against strangers or anything resembling what would happen at that Dollar General. The charges ranged from misdemeanor offenses to property damage and disorderly conduct, the kind of record that, taken individually, rarely results in more than a fine or a short stay in local detention. 6 arrests over 14 years is not, on its own, the profile of someone the system treats as an urgent threat. One entry in that history stands apart from the rest. In 2021, Willis faced an accusation of domestic battery involving an intimate partner. It's the most serious allegation in his documented past. And it's also the one that never made it to a courtroom. The case was dismissed after the complainant chose not to pursue it further. That's not unusual in domestic violence cases. Complainants withdraw for any number of reasons, and a dismissal doesn't confirm or deny what happened between 2 people behind closed doors. What it does confirm is that the allegation exists in the public record, unresolved, 3 years before Willis walked into a Dollar General and shot a woman he had never met. That last point is worth stating plainly, because it's the single most important fact investigators have established about Jerome Willis in relation to this case. He had no connection to Alexis Hill, not a customer relationship, not a prior visit to that store that anyone has identified, not a mutual acquaintance, a dispute, a grudge, or any kind of contact whatsoever before he approached her register that morning. Investigators have been direct about this. There is nothing in Willis's documented history, no relationship, no correspondence, no prior interaction, that ties him to Alexis Hill in any way before June 23rd. Whatever led him to that counter, it wasn't her. It wasn't anything she did, said, or represented to him personally. He was, by every available record, a stranger who walked into her store and ended her life for reasons that his own history offers no clear explanation for. With Jerome Willis dead at the scene of the second shooting, investigators were left to build this case entirely from what he left behind: physical evidence, digital records, and the accounts of everyone who crossed paths with him in the hours before June 23rd. At the Dollar General, investigators processed the store as a crime scene. The firearm used in the shooting, the ammunition, the 2 crumpled dollar bills still resting on the counter where Alexis had left them. All of it was collected, cataloged, and entered into evidence. A mile and a fifth away, at the former Muskogee Elementary School, a second team worked the parking lot where the shootout with police had taken place, recovering shell casings and mapping the confrontation that ended Willis's life. Beyond the physical evidence, investigators turned to something less visible, but potentially more revealing: Willis's digital footprint. They reviewed his phone records, his cell tower data placing him in the hours leading up to the shooting, and his activity on social media, looking for anything that might explain what happened. A grievance, a plan, a message to someone, any indication that this was building towards something. They found none of it. What the investigation has been able to do methodically is rule things out. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was taken from the register, and Willis left without so much as collecting his change. It wasn't a targeted act against Alexis Hill specifically. There's no dispute, relationship, or prior contact connecting the two of them. There's no indication of ideological or extremist motivation behind the shooting. And there's no financial motive that investigators have been able to identify anywhere in his history. What that leaves is an active case with a dead suspect and no established reason for what he did. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which took over the review of the officer-involved shooting that ended Willis's life, has kept a tip line open to the public throughout this process. A standard step in cases like this, but one that signals investigators are still hoping someone out there might know something that hasn't surfaced yet. Once the GBI's review is complete, the case file won't simply close. It will be handed over to the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit District Attorney's Office, whose role will be to formally review the actions of the officers involved in the shootout that killed Willis. A process separate from, but directly connected to, everything that happened that morning at the Dollar General. As of the most recent reporting available, no motive for the shooting of Alexis Hill has been announced. The investigation remains open, and for now, the only certainty in this case is the one investigators established almost immediately: that whatever drove Jerome Willis to that register, it wasn't Alexis Hill. On July 3rd, Alexis Hill was laid to rest at Cathedral of Prayer COGIC, where a Tri-City community choir was assembled specifically to honor her life. Days earlier, friends and family had gathered along the Columbus River Walk for a balloon release in her memory.
Loved ones, as you can hear, loved ones released balloons this afternoon near Banks Food Hall in memory of Alexis.
The kind of gathering communities hold not because it changes anything, but because grief needs somewhere to go. Her brother, Jonathan Hill, spoke to reporters there. "I've cried more in the last 4 days," he said, "than I have in my whole life."
It's really heartbreaking. I'm totally destroyed by it. To experience all that I experienced in life up to this point, to come back home, to lose my sister in this way, it's just heartbreaking. I've cried more in the last 4 days than I have in my whole life.
It's not a line written for effect. It's simply what he said, standing in a park with a release of balloons rising behind him, trying to put words to something that doesn't come with an explanation attached. There is one piece of this story that ends the way people hoped it would. Havoc, the K-9 officer shot alongside a human colleague outside that old elementary school, made it through surgery, recovered, and was eventually discharged and escorted home by multiple area police departments. A small procession honoring a working dog who did his job and survived it. Everyone else involved in this case is still waiting on a district attorney's review, waiting on a motive that may never surface, waiting on an answer to the only question this case has ever really been about, not what happened, because that part is documented in painful detail, but why a stranger decided in the time it takes to buy a package of hamburger buns that a woman's life was worth taking. That question doesn't have an answer yet. It may never have one.
Here today we had a murder right here at the Dollar General, and so we had to look out on the perpetrator, and officers were in the area looking for him. They saw him break the wood line, and officers got out, tried to make contact with him, and they got into a shootout.
Is the suspect dead at this moment?
The suspect is dead.
And what's the condition of the officers for this one?
One officer was struck in the face area by a projectile, and the K-9 was shot in the upper arm and upper leg into the pectoral area. And was life flighted to Auburn.
Auburn
surgery. Yeah.
Okay. And then was the officer that was shot, was that the K-9's handler?
No.
Okay, it's a separate officer.
Separate officer.
Okay. Then for the Dollar General shooting, this is connected to that one at Dollar General, you said?
It is.
So what would you like to say to the community right now? We've had 2 or 3 separate instances where shootings have been involved where people have died. One yesterday, one this morning, and now a suspect's dead. What would you like to say to the community at this point? I
would just say pray for the police officers. They're out here, they have a horrible job. Every person that is dead in this community, a police officer has to see that and has to notify the family. So there's a lot of mental stress that goes along with this job, and I'd ask the community to pray for these police officers.
If you want to know when it does, subscribe to Criminal Affairs. And if this case affected you the way it affected us putting it together, we've got another one next time that will too.